I want to take into our presenters' time. So if you haven't signed the attendance form when you came in, I'm sure you can't hear me. Can you hear me? Is this better? Not at all. Well, maybe when people stop talking, you'll hear me. Okay. You're right in the front row. Like, all right. So thank you everyone for coming. Thanks for making the Brink part of your entrepreneurial journey. I'm Amy Duncan. I'm director of the Brink SBDC. And if you haven't signed the attendance form, please do. We need to let our funders know how many people attended our events, that we just didn't make it up. So make sure if you haven't already scanned the QR code and let us know that you're here. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, okay, now we can. All right, great, awesome. So just welcome everyone. Just get some pizza and a drink and find your seat. So tonight we have, real excited to have, we're going to talk about competition, and of course related to that is IP. And we have Misti Cain and Noel Gillespie, and I will give them introductions when I finish my little part here. So we're excited to have them here. I do want to recognize Brink Partners as part of our innovation ecosystem here in San Diego. We have, of course, Procopio, where Noel is from, is a sponsor, and he's an attorney there. And I want to also, who else is here? Maybe I haven't seen everybody, but we are very thankful for our partners in the ecosystem. And of course, our grant funders, we are funded by the Small Business Administration, and Lucy Montgomery is here in the back. She's standing up, she's waving her hand. So she's our our local Small Business Administration rep. So she knows everything that's going on about small business. She knows about resources. She's a connector. So of course you can ask us at the Brink, but always feel free to reach out to her if you need access to something, and she always knows somebody. Of course, then we also get federal funding, and we also get state funding from the California Office of the Small Business Advocate, and we are one of the 13 Accelerate hubs. This is the San Diego Innovation Ecosystem, where we have San Diego has a great ecosystem of support organizations to help you. They help founders, they help startups, they help innovative founders. So if you make sure you become familiar, this is from Startup San Diego, it's their image, but make sure you explore all of them. Explore everything that everyone has to offer. Most of it's free. We all offer the variations of the same thing, and sometimes you'll like something better, you'll find a better fit. So I encourage you to take everything that the ecosystem has to offer. All right, so tonight we have Misti and Noel speaking. We're gonna have a small break between speakers. So the real pizza eating time was before we got started. And so I'm just gonna give you a little bit of overview about SDAC and pitch decon. So so if I have to get up and give my little 1 minute speech, it's not 1 minute, but the Brink SBDC provides free and confidential one-on-one advising and training to help innovative founders like you guys access capital like SBIR grants or angel or equity investment to build investable companies. But the reason why we do that is because we want to drive economic impact in the community. So that's when companies are started and they get funding and they hire people, and they sell things and generate revenue. There's a thriving ecosystem as opposed to Main Street all boarded up or business parks with lots of availability. So that's why we're here to help you. And when we help you, you're the ones that have make that economic impact. So if you don't know the difference between pitch prep and SDAC, so pitch prep is really, we're all about founders. We want to help you. We want to help you put your best pitch and your application together as possible. But SDAC is really the pitch competition, and they focus, of course, on founders because they want you to enter their competition, but they also focus on activating angel investors. So there's a lot, in this town, there's a lot of companies where if you worked really hard and saved your money, then you worked at like Qualcomm or Dexcom or Illumina, and you're probably an accredited investor. And so if you're interested in angel investing, you can join SDAC for you buy a unit, like $7,500, all the investors pool their money, and that's the investment that goes into the winner. And the founders make the selections, they roll up their sleeves and they really learn how to do due diligence. So it's a good partnership. It's a great, many of the investors who started SDAC go on to become investors at New Fund Venture Group. So if you've been following our series, this is what's left. Next week, we have business models and go-to-market strategy. That's going to be on Zoom. And then we're going to have an in-person where we're going to talk about a lot. It's going to be me and Benton Moore and Sylvia Ma. We're going to talk about how to find investors, different types of funding, and of course, what is traction and how do you show that in your slides? And of course, pitch decon, which I'll talk about, and then of course, you'll be ready to submit your application. I mean, you probably should give yourselves like 5 days at least. Go in there and see what you need to do. Don't do it that morning and be like, oh my God, there's all this writing I have to do. And then the celebration is the SDSU will be hosting a party. I don't have the information yet, but we'll send it out in our newsletter and on LinkedIn. And then, of course, this SDAC finale will be on June 5th over at San Diego State. So just the way the timeline works is we do bring pitch prep these for January, February, the applications are due, and then what they call the iTrack. In March, all the investors are going to be looking at the GUST applications. They usually get around 100. And then they select 25. And the pitching comes in April. So 25 will come in and do a 3-minute pitch. And then they'll vote 10 or 12. And those guys will come in and do 10-minute pitch. And then they'll select 6. And then the 6 are who they're going to pitch at the finale. But during the month of May, the investors are going to do due diligence on those 6 companies. So that's where you need a deal room and you have to have all your documents. So you can apply. The application portal is open. You can scan this QR code. There's a link there. And Stephen will pop, I think he should have it in the follow-up email for tomorrow that you'll get, not tomorrow, but a couple days after the event, this event. Okay, so I think it was Harry who asked me about pitch deconstruction last week. And I was like, oh my God, I haven't really explained this to them. So what happens, it's going to be in this room and it's going to take an hour. And you guys, all of you, I hope you all attend, you're going to have your 1-minute pitch ready and you can write it down or read it off your phone and we'll have it, you'll line up here. We'll do like this side of the room, we'll line up there. And then we get through them, then that side of the room. So you're going to line up. Okay, you're next. And you're like, and then we hand you the microphone and there's a countdown clock. In 1 minute, you're going to be like, I'm Amy Duncan. I'm director. Please don't do that. Hey, welcome to the Nexus Theater. What a great crowd. I'm Amy Duncan. Whatever works for you. But please, I'm Amy Duncan. I'm director of the Brink SBDC. We provide free and confidential one-on-one advising and so on. 1 minute. And then if the clock dings, we're going to get a little thing. No, we're not going to do that, but we're going to clap and you have to leave. You get 1 minute. So please respect that. And then the next person will come up. And then we're going to have 10 SDAC investors and they're going to be the judges. So they're going to give you feedback. They're like, okay, we might actually have a volunteer that starts first and then they get to come back after watching everybody and then we'll see if they made improvements. But the SDAC investors will give you general improvement, like, okay, this is typically what happens. Well, this is what we saw overall. Nobody said their name when they started. They talked about the product way too much. There wasn't really an ask and so on. So they're going to give you that kind of feedback, everybody, in general. They're not going to single anyone out, just the volunteer. And then if you're ready, and you should come prepared with a 3-minute pitch deck in a PDF. And if you want to pitch, you'll email it to us and we're going to vote on the 1-minute pitches. And the top, I think we're going to try to make time for maybe 5. We'll see. Those guys are going to come up and pitch with their slides, their 3-minute pitch deck. And then you'll get one-on-one feedback with the SDAC investors and everybody gets to hear, right? So, which is a learning experience, a safe space. And so, we specifically chose the judges to be, not judges, whatever they're going to be, providing you feedback, but they're the SDAC investors. So you get a chance to meet them, which is really cool, and they're going to, if you are applying, they're going to hear about your product or your business. And then when they find you in guest, I'm like, oh, why do I heard of them before? Or, so that's always really good. So I encourage everybody to come and do 1 minute pitch. And if you are so advanced, you have your 3 minute pitch, be ready to do that too. All right. So this is little guidelines for that. Because we have Noel Gillespie from Procopio, I wanted to let you know that he also runs IP office hours at the Brink. And so if you want to, this is once a month, like on the last Friday or so, Wednesday of the month. And so the way that we schedule those is through Natalia Pence. And you just email her, let her know what you want to do, and she'll help get you scheduled. So we're excited that that's a new thing for the Brink this year. Because we're an innovation center, this was something that was very important that I thought we had to have. So we're excited that we have Noel on board. All right, if you don't have an advisor and you want help with your pitch prep or your application, this is how you register for advising. And of course, to get updates on everything that we do, including when the celebration is, just follow us on LinkedIn. I'm not going to go through this. So now we're going to introduce our next speaker. Let me get her slides up. So, okay. So our next speaker is an investor. She has an advisory consultancy service and she's also, you might know her. She's doing a TEDx San Diego talk next week, next Wednesday, during the same time as ours, but it's on Zoom, so you can get the recording. So she'll be speaking at TEDx San Diego, which is phenomenal, but you probably know her from Techstars. So let's bring a big round of applause for Misti Cain.
How are y'all doing tonight?
Great.
Do you like how I started off like it's going to be a comedy show? It's not. I love how I ask, even though I can't individually get feedback from each of you, like, how are you doing? And you, and you. I'm just biding time while she's bringing this up. Does anyone here have their own startup right now? Oh, good Lord, that's awesome. Yes, this one here?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so I know that Amy gave a little bit of an introduction of who I am, but I wanted to share with you guys who I am and then get right into it talking about competition, because I think it's really important for you to understand what investors think when you present your company. I also want you to know that, is there anyone in here who absolutely loves being talked at for hours and hours? Okay, one person in the back who's lying.
What do you mean talked at?
Where you don't get to say anything, you just have to sit there and listen to them for hours and hours. Do you love that? Yeah, not a lot of people do. So if you have a question or a comment or feedback, feel free, shoot your hand up. You can interrupt me. It's not the Misti monologue. I want this to be interactive, and so that you feel that you also get value out of it as well. I am, as she mentioned, an investor and venture partner with Techstars. Techstars is an accelerator. Is there anyone here who is not familiar with Techstars? Okay, no worries. Techstars is an accelerator, which means that we have an application period where we allow startups who are in the pre-seed phase to apply to be part of our program. We go through, I'm with Techstars Anywhere, which is the remote first program. We actually have programs all over the world. We are the largest pre-seed investor in the world, according to PitchBook and Crunchbase. And after the application period, we go through thousands and thousands of applicants, whittle it down to only 10 companies. Those 10 companies go through a 3-month accelerator program, which simply means we try and help them do more faster. So a year's worth of work in 3 months, which is a lot. And then they become part of the Techstars ecosystem and the Techstars network, which is Techstars for Life. So I am a venture partner there. I was also previously a founder, and I'm a recovering digital marketing strategist. So I work for a digital marketing agency, got to work on a lot of really cool, amazing brands. I then founded my own company prior to coming on to Techstars. And then a fun fact about me was that I was a business reality show host. So if you've heard me speak before, maybe you've heard me mention it, but MailChimp, who got acquired by Intuit, They were putting out evergreen content because they spent all this money on advertising and creating ads. And they're like, that's a lot of money that goes to waste. We can't do anything with it. So they decided to create evergreen shows like podcasts and reality shows. Well, they partnered with production companies. One of the production companies that they partnered with was Scout. Scout produces Queer Eye, they produce Legendary, they produce all these shows on Netflix and HBO and Bravo. And they created a show called Work. Actually, it was called Work because Scout Productions. And I was the business strategy host of that show. So that's just a fun fact about me. So the three things that I want to focus on today with you all, number one, talking about what competition is and how you present that when you're talking to an investor. Number two, want to go over UVP and UA, promise it has nothing to do with sunscreen. And then number three, how to create a solid UVP and what that means for you and why it's so very, very important. So just shout it out or feel free to raise your hand if you want to be super formal. What does it mean to have a competitor? What's a competitor to you? Yes.
Any other solution that a potential customer goes to solve their problem?
Okay, another solution that a customer goes to solve their problem. I love it. Does anyone have anything different?
Company that keeps you on your toes.
A company that keeps you on your toes. Okay. Yes.
Somebody that does something that you do but differently.
They do what you do, but differently. Okay, awesome.
I was gonna say the company that offers a similar product or service.
A company that offers a similar product or service. Yes, in the back.
Targeting your same market share.
They're targeting your same market share. Yes.
I like to say part of my peer group.
Oh, your peer. Look at you, so friendly. I love that. My competitors are friends. Got it. Okay.
Might be competing against each other, but we might also
Be synergistic. Okay, perfect.
somehow.
So you're the optimistic entrepreneur. I love it. Keep that energy. Anybody else?
After your millions of dollars.
They're
Yeah.
doing what for millions of
They're
dollars?
after my millions of dollars.
They're after your millions of dollars. Awesome. And the fact he has millions of dollars, y'all. So if you're looking for investment, perfect. Thank you for announcing that. So it's anything at all that prevents someone from using your product or service. And a lot of times you think of, oh, it's another product or service. Maybe they're doing exactly what you're doing. Maybe they're doing something that's tangential to what you're doing, but they can also, a competitor can be status quo. And I want to give you an example of that. So when I think of crazy glue, does everyone know what crazy glue is? When you think of crazy glue, do you think of like arts and crafts or putting inanimate objects, making sure they stick together? Right? That's what crazy glue is for, right? Well, when my husband sees crazy glue, he thinks of it as something that you use to put a wound back together. When I think that he should actually seek actual medical attention. So status quo or a tangential product or service could also be considered competition. And a lot of times when founders are presenting their deck to investors, they don't include the last two. They only think of people who are doing exactly what it is that they're doing, where we're going to talk about what an investor actually wants to see out of your deck and why it's so important that you include those last two things that might be tangential and things that also might be status quo. Does anyone know what I mean when I say status quo competitor? Yes.
Could that be an example of the famous Henry Ford quote where if you had asked people what they want, they would have said faster horses because that was kind of the status quo? And then he came along with something that totally revolutionized the automobile.
Right? I love that. Yes. So he was mentioning the Henry Ford quote. If you would have asked people what they wanted, they would have said they wanted a faster horse because almost everybody had a horse at that time. He came along and built a car. It could also be the thing that they're doing that's just getting by. So I had a founder who refused to use Notes app or any sort of SaaS product for their project or task management. They used Post-it notes and an actual pen and paper. The fact that they could still use pen and paper was just amazing to me, but I'm like, how do you keep track of everything and how do you search for things? And what if you're not actually home where your pen and paper are, you don't take it with you, right? They're like, well, this is just what I do, right? I use pen and paper. That's status quo. It's what's working for them. That's what they're going to use. It has nothing to do with another SaaS product or a tangential SaaS product. It's just how they go about solving their problem. Does this look familiar to anybody? Yes? What would you call this?
I don't want to spend too much time. I saw this in a different sense, that's in a technical sense. So
Okay, you saw it in a technical sense. I like that. What would that be to you? Like, what would you call this?
SWOT analysis, like, which is a opportunity threat, is that the one?
A SWOT analysis? Okay. What other name do you have for this? I like your energy. He said delusional. What,
Competitive landscape is also one of them, right?
competitive landscape? Okay.
The YouTube videos I watch on this, on competition said not to do, use that. They
So,
said use the benefit. And like with the other company's names and list the benefits and like do like check marks or X's.
I love how you just become the segue for me. I'll give you that $20 that I owe you. What would you call it?
Product market fit.
You would call that, okay, so we have some terminology for it. Personally, my favorite is, I like the person who said delusional, but this is also considered a quadrant, competitive analysis. What about this? Is that what you were thinking about? Is that what the YouTube video told you to use?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cute. What would you call this?
Competitive landscape.
Another competitive analysis, right? What are the things that you notice about both of those pictures? If you, meaning the one with all the check marks or the one in the top right corner, what's the commonality that you see with both of those images?
There are similar products which are like competing in the space with the same sort of features, capabilities, right?
Okay, so similar products,
Yeah.
they're listing a set of features and capabilities. Typically, when this is included in an investor deck, who comes up with those images? You do, right? The founder. I promise these aren't trick questions. You're like, what does she mean? They're easy. Okay, so you come up with them. And if you're coming up with them and they're a list of products and features, would it stand to reason that you're probably going to put in products and features that you know are going to make you look good? Right? Of course you will. So please stop doing that. Don't want you to use either one of those images or either one of those methods talking about the features. And here's the reason why. As an investor, when you use either one of those images, obviously what you're doing is highlighting, number one, features, right? You're highlighting things about your solution that makes you look good. So if you're using the quadrant, you're always in the top right, all by yourself. You're just like, look at me, I'm so amazing. And if you're using one of those listicles, one of those check marks, you always have all of the features, and then any of your competition does not have the features, right? They're always missing something. And when an investor sees this, generally they say a curse word, but I won't. They're like, oh, that's bullshit. But what we actually tell the founder is, prove it to me. We want to see more proof. And instead of going through that where a founder's like, I don't believe you, show me the proof. And then you're trying to prove to the founder that, to the investor, that what you put in your quadrant or what you put in your check mark actually makes you a viable venture backable company. What you should do instead is show the investor, number one, that you will be a market leader, and also that you know your relevant competition. The two key words are, you're going to be a market leader, and the second important word is relevant competition. And I'll tell you why those are the two most important words. The first one, market leader. If I say Uber, who's a big competitor to Uber? Perfect. If I say Airbnb, who's a big competitor to Airbnb? Awesome. So for every Uber, there's a Lyft. For every Airbnb, there's a Vrbo. There are usually more than one super big players in a space, right? Which means that it's okay to have competition. It's okay to have another really huge competitor in your space. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You guys are maybe competing for the same market share, maybe not, but you want to be one of those behemoths. And so you need to prove how you're going to get there. How are you going to be one of those behemoths? The problem is, typically, has anyone here raised a Series A with their current venture? Awesome. This is the crowd that I'm looking for. Has anyone raised a seed round? Oh, yes. Okay, be proud of that. He's like, sure, that's awesome. But typically you're fairly
On
early.
Grant money as compared to seed money?
Is it non-dilutive?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you haven't raised like a venture capital. You can say that you've raised money, but it's non-dilutive funding. Wonderful, awesome. So if you've raised very little money or you're just starting out, you're super early. So comparing yourself to a behemoth in the industry is probably not going to go over well. You probably don't have enough data. You can't really back it up. So what you want to do is show comparisons that include not only competitors that are around or akin to where you are in your journey right now, but also tangential and also the status quo. And it's very hard to show human behavior in a quadrant or in one of those checklists. So what does that look like? And why is that important? Also, Amy, will this deck be shared?
Yes.
Okay, and the reason why I say that is because if you're looking for, well, who is my relevant competition? You can use all different types of research. You can do Google and ChatGPT research. You can hire an analyst to do some research for you. You can use third-party tools. That et cetera on there is a clickable link. It goes to a blog post by HubSpot that lists like 28 market research tools. You really want to dig in and see who's doing what it is that you're doing. But I'm going to show you the how versus the what. There's lots of resources that you can use to look at your competition, but I want to show you what's important to highlight in your pitch deck that investors are going to be like, okay, I'm interested in this. This is a quote by Kareem Galzar, who's a founder and partner at OKG Capital. And what he says is that a finely tuned competitor analysis that is deeply analytical and actionable is the thing that is most important. And what that means is you don't just want to show, oh, I have some competitors, I know they exist, but the features on my solution are actually better. What you want to dig into is the problem that you're solving, why you're the best at it, how you are going to go to market and beat out everybody else who's trying to solve that problem, either in the same or unique way, and then what you intend to do if someone has your same or similar solution. So what does that look like? Number one, you're focusing on the main problem, not your solution. If you start off, I'm building XYZ feature, you've already started off in the wrong place. When you're thinking about your competition, you do not want to compare the widget they have to the widget you have. Even if you say, I've got patents. Patents, there are loopholes. Remember when the iPhone came out and everyone's like, oh, snap, the iPhone, nobody's ever going to be able to have a touchscreen phone. And now everybody has a touchscreen phone, right? Even patents, there are ways to get around a patent. So they're not something that is just lock, stock, and barrel where no one else can copy what it is that you're doing. There is very little technology that is not copyable, right? Your products, your features, especially if you're building like a SaaS app, most of the time that can be copied. So what you're doing is trying to solve a problem in a really, really unique way and show investors that you are better at doing that and you are going to be stickier at doing that than anybody else. And I'm going to give you an example. I learn best with examples, so I always like to give examples. Is anyone familiar with the brand Zappos? Okay, if you're not familiar with Zappos, Zappos was a shoe seller. They were an online shoe seller. They got purchased by Amazon. If you know anything about selling shoes, there's lots of shoe sellers online. Shoes aren't really anything that's fabulous. There's not really anything creative about having an e-commerce store. Does anyone know why Zappos won? Why Zappos got acquired by Amazon? Why Zappos got a lot of PR? Why Zappos became a market leader? Yes. Customer service and free returns. But what about their customer service and their free returns?
Oh, I mean, the founder wrote a whole book called like Key to Happiness about how they just absolutely go over the top and bend over backwards for customer service.
Right. Has anyone had a less than desirable customer service experience recently? A couple of you? Okay. Oh, it happens? How weird. Yeah. Most of the time when you go to places, it's like, wait, you're in customer service, right? Why are you so annoyed with me? This is your entire job. But as we know, customer service isn't the best most of the time. Sometimes it's really great, but most of the time it's pretty crappy. Zappos went above and beyond and became the leader, like actually the influencer, the thought leader, like the GOAT of customer service. That is how they won. It had nothing to do with their website. It had nothing to do with their e-commerce, their widgets, their call to action button, the colors they use, the logo they use, what grids they used, nothing at all. Whether or not they had AI on their platform, it was all about the fact that they said, we are going to be so good at customer service. Everyone who comes to work for us is going to learn how to do every customer service job, and we are going to do free returns, which at that time was unheard of because it's a lot of money. You ship something out to someone, they send it back to you, it costs you money. They're like, we don't care. We're going to do free returns. That was like, whoa, right? Had nothing to do with their actual product. The problem that they were solving was the fact that when people wanted to purchase something online, they had a really crappy experience. They differentiated themselves by being amazing at customer service and offering something that's usually a really big hassle to people. Does anyone shop on Amazon? Okay, so one or two of you. Awesome. Is anyone an Amazon Prime member? Okay, another 3 or 4 of you. Cool. So I am also an Amazon Prime member. There are times where I will literally take a screenshot of a product and look it up to see if I can find it on Amazon. Don't even care if I pay more. Why? Because Amazon is amazing at their customer service. Amazon is amazing at I don't have to put things in boxes. Y'all, I can just grab the thing that I want and just take it back and hand it to a person. Don't even have to box it up. It's awesome. I do not care what their actual app looks like. I don't care what their website looks like. I don't like ogle over what their colors are or their logos are or whether they have an AI chatbot. What they do is they solve a problem for me. And when you do that, you can lead in that particular market with something that has nothing to do with your product because you are solving an urgent and pervasive either problem or desire for someone. That's what you need to show investors. If you go in and say, oh, I have this AI tool that does these things and we're doing this in our product, investors are going to be like, anybody can copy that. What's going to make you a market leader? And who are your relevant competitors who are doing the same thing? That brings us to what sounds like sunscreen. Does anyone know what UVP actually stands for? Unique value proposition. Yes. Does anyone know what a unique value proposition is?
What you do differently.
What you do differently? Okay.
How much of the problem you're getting rid of?
How much of the problem you're getting rid of? Okay. For the customer. Perfect.
How you stand out in the crowd, right?
How you stand out in the crowd. Okay, awesome. I love all of these answers. And how this relates back to competition is the thing that is going to make you a market leader in the space is your unique value proposition as well as your UA, which we'll get to in just a second. Let me first tell you what a unique value proposition is not. A unique value proposition is not your product. It's not your features. It's not jargon. If you've ever seen one of those, we are creating a comprehensive B2B, B2C, but also B2P, that's business to people solution that allows you to transform your business in amazing, authentic, and genuine ways. Who knows what I do? Nobody, right? I used a lot of words. They were very flowery. They meant absolutely nothing. Unique value proposition is not that. Is anyone familiar with the brand Maybelline? Yes. All the women are like, girl, yes. Maybelline is the brand. One of their taglines is maybe she's born with it, but maybe it's Maybelline. It's always Maybelline. She doesn't wake up looking like that. So your unique value proposition is not Maybelline. You are not generally born with it. It's something that you have to develop over time and find out what really attracts your customers to you. So if you're sitting somewhere like, oh, I'm going to start this business and my unique value proposition is, and you're not out talking to customers, you're already doing yourself a disservice. It's also not your catchphrase or your tagline. And it's also not hype. So it's nothing that's like the most innovative. It's crushing. What are some of the other things that people say? Revolutionizing. Oh, I love that one. We're revolutionizing the industry. No, you're not. For the most part, you're not.
What about disruptive?
Yeah, that's a no. Yeah, that's a no. That's a no. Yes. Anything. I could interrupt you in the middle of a sentence and be disruptive. That doesn't really tell me anything about why you're amazing. Also, I'm going to show you a neat little trick, okay? And this is how you know that you have settled on a UVP. Raise your hand if your solution is innovative. Awesome. Raise your hand if you are a hardworking founder. Awesome. Raise your hand if you have attention to detail and care about your customer. Perfect. Raise your hand if you are a serial founder who has exited 2 companies with multiple 8-figure exits and have currently raised at least $5 million on your current venture. Oh, snap.
Yes,
Okay.
only to the last part, but not the first.
Right, exactly. So when you have very flowery hype words, everybody and their mother's dog is going to say like, oh, that's me too, me too, me too. What you want to do is the thing that not everybody else can say that they've done. So disruptive, revolutionary, innovative, all of these things, everybody else is going to be saying them, and they absolutely cannot back it up. It's just very flowery adjectives. What a unique value proposition actually is something that's different. It is your differentiation. It is unlike anything else that exists in that way, but it is also valuable. There are times when people make things that are really unique, which is great, but they bring absolutely no value to anyone. It kind of reminds me of that. There was this art installation where an artist got paid some ungodly sum of money, and he decided to take a banana and paste it to a canvas with some duct tape and call it art. That was definitely different, but I have thoughts. Also, it's something that's very specific. So your unique value proposition needs to be quantifiable. You need to be able to point to why it is unique and why it's valuable. It's concise, it's compelling, and it's clear. It is very easy to understand. And also, it's something that may not last forever. It may change, but it helps you win with customers now. And one of an example that I can give you is Zoom. When Zoom came out, there were tons of video conferencing software systems, like so many. There was GoToWebinar, and I think there was like Uber Conference. Why did Zoom become #1? Because they made their software frictionless and easy. Well, now we expect frictionless and easy. That's like not a big deal. But back when Zoom was getting started, to be able to 1 click set up your video conferencing, not have to log in and video conference with someone else, it was unheard of. If you ever used GoToWebinar in the past, you had to have your own server, you had to have an IT guy, you had to download some things, you had to put in a code, you had to give your social security number. It was a hot mess. Right now, Zoom probably wouldn't be very competitive, but back when they were first getting started, they ate up the market share because of how frictionless they were. So what is the difference between a unique value proposition and your UA? Your UA is your unfair advantage. Unique value proposition is the amazing thing, the value, the differentiation that you bring to your customers. Your unfair advantage is the thing that you want to present to investors. That means here is why I am going to win. I'm going to give you a couple examples of this. For example, let's say that you want to enter the government space and it requires lots of clearance, it requires lots of permitting, it requires a lot of red tape, but you have the background, you have the permits, you have the certifications, you can get in there fast, get a lot of letters of intent, or get a lot of customers before anyone else because they have to go through a rigorous 2-3 year process. That's an unfair advantage. Let's say you're best friends with the CEO of a major corporation who with 1 email or 1 social media post, he can blast you out or she can blast you out to millions of people. That's an unfair advantage. A lot of people thought, oh, Instagram started and then all of a sudden they had 1 million users. No, Instagram was a slog that was trying to copy Foursquare. And then their marketing guy came along who happened to know Jack Dorsey. They had a little bit of traction, and then Jack Dorsey tweeted about Instagram, and then Instagram blew up. That's an unfair advantage. Something that not everybody can do or would be very hard to copy or almost impossible to copy. That is an unfair advantage. Those are things that make you even more desirable to investors. It also helps you to get past your competition, whatever that competition might be. So what I want you all to do, yes, question?
So unfair advantage, what if you kind of have to like, let's say you got your innovative product,
Yep.
right? And let's say your competitors don't have that product.
Okay.
And there's not anything that could really hinder them from making that product.
Yep.
But they don't have it yet.
Okay.
They haven't thought of it the way that you do or make it perfect, you know, like you're going to make it.
Right.
How would you think to kind of protect yourself with an unfair advantage? Because there's nothing that's stopping these competitors. Like Zappos, right? Anybody could have came out with better customer service, but
Right.
they didn't necessarily. So it's like, how can you present the unfair advantage? Like, how can you say like, okay, there's nothing that's stopping these competitors from making what I want to make.
Perfect.
But we haven't made this yet.
I got you.
Okay, thank you.
So if you have a product that can be duplicated, an unfair advantage, number one, can be first mover advantage, but you have to be solving an urgent and pervasive problem. Just because you're first doesn't mean you're going to be amazing. The other thing that you can do is make your product sticky. And when I say sticky, make it very difficult for someone to go to another product once they start using you. Another example. Is anyone familiar with Donald Miller and Story Brand? Okay, awesome. You guys seem like big fans too. I like it. They're like, yes. Okay, I personally also like Donald Miller and Story Brand. The thing that Donald Miller did that I thought was really ingenious is he teaches you how to have really compelling marketing, really compelling storytelling, getting your message out and getting customers with that compelling story and compelling messaging. He also has a lot of courses. Courses can be duplicated. The information that he's sharing, I don't think it's brand new. I think he presents it in a very simple way, but anybody can make courses. But what he also had to go along with his courses was he had a portal. And in the portal, you paid for access to the courses, and the portal had worksheets. And you fill things in the worksheet, you put your information in the worksheet. As long as you're paying for Story Brand, you get access to your portal. You go through course after course after course. They've got little nuggets in the portal. You're putting notes in the portal. He asks you to upload things in the portal. You're putting everything that you need in that portal. Guess what happens when you stop paying? You lose access to all your stuff. He made it very sticky. Let's say you want to go to another course. It's like, well, where am I going to, now I have to put my notes and stuff, but I have all my Story Brand notes right here. Again, it's not something that was super difficult, but he made it very sticky for people. Once they got into his world, it would be very disadvantageous for them to leave his world. They would lose access to things or they would have to find a different way to port all of that over. Lots of databases and data centers that collect your data do that as well. They make it very difficult for you to take your data to another provider. Conversely, there are providers who say, if you switch to us, we'll do the movement for you. We'll switch you over to our platform ourselves. And that's another sometimes win for that particular founder or that particular company if they're trying to get market share. So if you start, you're solving an urgent, pervasive problem, you get a lot of people first because they're like, oh, I like you. Make yourself the Kleenex of your brand.
Real quick, is there
Yep.
any books that you know of or content that gives examples of sticky? Like, okay, you want to show different examples of being sticky? Like,
Yeah.
is there any resources? If it comes up later, let me know. But
Okay, perfect. I'm a really big book nerd, so I have lots of books that I love. But if I think of one that's like really hits on that stickiness and that moat, then I will definitely share.
I have a good example of something sticky. I just bought a new phone from Verizon and it had a big discount on it, but that discount is only effective if I make small payments over a period of 2 or 3 years.
Got it.
In order to change my plan, I would have to pay hundreds of dollars to keep my phone.
That is definitely an example of sticky. Yes. Did everyone hear his example? Awesome.
So, let's say on your pitch deck, if you're
Yep.
trying to convey this, you have a, could you give an example of like how you could concisely express that to
an investor? Absolutely. So what's your business? Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, they're wearable rangefinders for golf. They're glasses that tell you your distance and, I mean, I know exactly like how it worked, how it'd be sticky, but I'm
Right.
thinking like where that would fit.
Into your pitch deck?
Yeah.
So it depends. Investors look for 3 things, and I call it the 3 T. This is at a very high level. They look for team, they look for tech, they look for traction. So if you have an amazing team, you're going to want to structure your deck so that team is up front and center, and that's the thing that they see first. Let's say you have an impressive background. If you have technology that's really, really incredible, that is 10x innovation over what exists right now, you're gonna wanna highlight that. And if it's your traction, meaning we have a wait list of 10,000 people over the last 3 months and that's consistently growing, you're gonna wanna highlight that. So if you're asking like, well, what slide do I put it in? That's something that I don't wanna be too prescriptive about because it depends on what the most compelling thing about your pitch is. But the thing that you want to be able to convey is, here's the problem we're solving. Because you can have cool glasses, but people are like, these are cool, but I don't really need them, right? So make sure that you are solving an urgent and pervasive problem. And the way that you can back that up is with traction. And a lot of times people think traction is revenue. You don't have to have revenue. If you have a wait list, if you have letters of intent, if you have design partners that say, hey, we're going to actually work with you to build these things out, you can convey that to an investor like, I need your money to unlock these milestones. I have a wait list of gated cut, 10,000 customers want these products. I can't build them because I don't have the money. But they have already signed up and they told me, once these are available, I will pay you. Or I'm taking pre-orders and I can only take pre-orders on this amount. Like they actually gave me money. You can convey that to an investor. And I know you're like, well, what does this have to do with competition? The thing is, you're trying to show that you are going to be a market leader. What you're building is the most important thing that people are going to want. You are going to be the jacuzzi of your market, the Kleenex of your market. You are going to the Google of your market, regardless of what else exists out there. And you don't do that by comparing features. You don't do that with a quadrant. You don't do that with check marks because that's easily copyable. You need to do that by showing like, here's what's out there. Here's what people are doing. Here is how I'm changing human behavior. They are coming to me because my solution, whatever that solution is, and don't fall in love with it, but my solution for their problem is the absolute best. I have their trust. I have their respect. They are clamoring for what it is that I am making. All I need is your money in order to do this at scale. And that's how you would convey it. Where exactly in the deck you put it, it's wherever it makes the most.
I was thinking about the data part because
Got it.
we have a like a platform that will be using it and it is sticky, but I'm
Yeah.
like, how would
you convey it in the form
Yeah.
of data? When you say it's sticky, do you have retention metrics or are you actually selling it and are people utilizing the product now?
People aren't using it, but we have pre-orders.
Awesome.
Yeah, but so it also gives you club suggestions, so it knows your game and your feedback, and it takes all that into the system, so it can give you the feedback on what you should be doing and how.
Right, and you're collecting that information in a dashboard,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's pretty sticky right there. Like,
Yeah.
I have Fitbit, I use a Fitbit. And there is a new watch that came out that's not Fitbit, it's another manufacturer. I'm not gonna go to that manufacturer because I'm like, well, I'll lose all my Fitbit data. I have like 5 or 6 years worth of Fitbit data. All of my analytics here, I'd have to start all over again. Even though this watch looks prettier, I'm not moving.
No.
And they have lots of integration. So they created stickiness by keeping my data. And I want that consistency. And then they analyze my data over time. They compare my data, and they give me like, reminders of like, oh, back in 2015, you were basically a slug and look at you now, you have so many steps. So there's lots of things that they do and analysis that they give me to where having people's data very, very sticky.
Yeah.
So that's something that you can convey as well. Yes.
Download your Fitbit data to CSV platform and upload it to this other watch you like.
I can what? Yeah.
All the data.
Yes, that's true.
I love doing it and doing it my own.
I can do it, but you have just created another problem for me. Is it possible? Yes. Is it easy to do? No. If it was like push a button and then all my data presented the exact same way, right? Because Lord knows, I don't want to like figure out if this data and these fields map to the right thing. I just don't want to mess with it. So they have a customer in me just because I'm pretty late status quo, right? Yes.
So I'm just curious, like, can you use connections as a sticky like data point? And I'm assuming yes, for example, like LinkedIn, but for an app that's more for, I guess, both a pleasure, but like Instagram. You know, like you have TikTok, for example, that's coming.
Absolutely. Network effect can definitely be sticky because if all of your friends are going somewhere or doing this thing or on some platform, of course, number one, there's FOMO, right? Oh, but everybody that I know is already here. And if I go over here, it's crickets. And then also the network effect of like email, right? Email's not a lot of fun by yourself. You have to have somebody else to give it to. So if you create a solution that is actually solving a problem that requires another connection in order to make it more enjoyable and desirable, and that enjoyment and that desire increases with the more people that you're connected to, absolutely, that could be sticky. Great example. Yes.
So my question is mostly about the distinct difference between the UVP and the UA.
Yeah.
So isn't that the UVP is like directly around the product and the UA would be more around the people? So for instance, you're kind of saying, okay, who here has this? And everybody raised their hand, but then you got to the point where you said, who has raised more than 5 million plus has had 2 exits? That to me sounds like that person is the UA, like they're.
Got it. Yeah, so, and I understand where the confusion is, and so I'm gonna take that on me. Unique value proposition is the thing that makes you unique for your customers. It's the reason why customers would choose you over another similar tangential or status quo option. So that's your UVP. And just consider the words that are in there. I am unique, meaning I'm very different. I'm valuable. And that is the thing that makes you want to propose to me, unique value proposition, right? So whoever your customer is, your unfair advantage, that is more investor or commodity related. That's the thing that investors are gonna say, why you? I could buy a Maserati, I could buy a house in the Hamptons, I could put my money in the stock market, I could go to Starbucks and set it on fire. Why am I gonna give that money to you? Oh, because you have an unfair advantage. You are doing something that not a lot of other people are doing. I find that amazing. It's gonna be very hard for someone to either catch up to you, to copy you, or to take you out. It's gonna be very difficult. That's an unfair advantage. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. Here and then in the back.
I just want to make sure that I got the gist of what you were trying to convey. The 3 things that you mentioned. Do I need only one or all 3 in order to convey that my UVP and UA are worth betting on?
So it is awesome if you have all 3. But if you have one that is really, really strong, did you see the documentary Fire Festival? You didn't? Don't watch it. But essentially it is this, I'm gonna call him a scammer. I'll just give you the Cliff's Notes. This guy put together a festival. I put that in air quotes. He marketed the festival. There's going to be models there. There's going to be celebrities there. It's going to be this amazing festival on this island. He got a whole bunch of people to buy tickets to go there. I don't really know what his claim to fame is, but he, very charismatic person, crashed and burned. Like the event did not happen at all in like the worst possible way. He had traction for sure. He got people to pay him. He also had, I'm gonna call light team because he himself was seen as a charismatic individual. He knew lots of high profile individuals. He had had another semi-successful, I also thought it was a scam, but semi-successful startup before. But he did not have anything relatively resembling a great product. Went to jail first, came out of jail, started another business scam, and got funding for that. He had team, and he also had traction from before. That's a horrible example because he was a horrible person. But my point is you can have all 3. That would be very, very baller. You do not have to have all 3. If you are an amazing founder, you have a really great background, you are a subject matter expert in what you do. Let's say you used to work for NASA and now you are going to build something in the aeronautics industry. I'm maybe going to take another look at you. Like, okay, you've got really deep subject matter expertise. You've been vetted by NASA. Maybe you have a PhD in what it is that you do. You're really strong in team, but it's your first company. You've never been a founder before. You're starting from scratch. You don't have the tech. You don't have the traction. You're coming to talk to me as an investor. I'm going to say, okay, what's your idea? And if it's something that's a 10x solution, I'm like, I kind of believe in this. I might take a bet on you, right? Why? Because NASA took a bet on you. You only have one. So it depends. And it also depends on what you're building, who you're talking to as an investor. But yes, it would be best if you had all 3, but you don't always have to.
We have time for a few more questions.
Oh,
You
yes.
can cut into my closing time.
Sorry.
And the break.
Okay, one in the back and then we'll move on. Well, I'm almost done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So can your unfair advantage be part of your team? So like we have a CTO who's successfully exited for 160 million and has worked in our space before, but is again, like working with us because we have a patent on new technology.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned the patent before doesn't matter that much because really, if Apple wanted to steal it, we'd get killed. But can we say, hey, we have this guy who's done it before, who's worked in the space for 20 years, and we have a utility patent on new technology. And we're gonna be the first to do this because right now, the way our competitors are solving the solution is expensive, infrastructure dense and complex.
Yeah.
So can we have that kind of two-part of, we have the people who have done it before, even though there's other founders who
Right.
have done that before. So would that work in tandem?
It could, so I would have to definitely take a look at exactly what it is that you're building, but having, here's the other thing that I don't want you guys to get too hung up on is years having done something. So I swear to you this, I'm not making this up. Sometimes I will have founders who pitch me and they're like, collectively, our team has over 100 years doing this. And I'm like, okay. The amount of years that you do something isn't really that important. Why? Because you could have done it wrong for 100 years, right? Collectively. No shade. I'm sure that your CTO is amazing. But what I'm saying is don't lead with the number of years, lead with outcomes. So if he's done it for 20 years, what did he accomplish in those 20 years that made him phenomenal? Versus I've been doing this for 2 years, but in this 2-year time, I have broken this record, this. I don't care that you haven't done it for 20 years. You're a rock star.
He's built the products and he's exited with 160 million. He wants to do it again.
Yeah, I would take a second look. That's a very nice unfair advantage. Absolutely. Because it shows that he was a previous builder. He has some subject matter expertise. He knows what it takes. There's lots of things that go into building and then exiting for sure. So yes, can absolutely be an unfair advantage. This was just a guess that UVP by the description. The first one is one tap and a car comes directly to you. Oh, I thought that would be. Oh, there we go. Okay. You guys scared me for a second. The second one, helping people communicate better wherever they write online on a daily basis. Grammarly, right? You know what these technologies are based on, those were not jargony words. They were very simple to understand. Almost everyone in here could guess what they were because number one, it was unique. It was something different. I mean, also they're like billion-dollar players in the space right now. But the point of that being that it was very simple, very easy to understand. Your unique value proposition needs to be that simple, that clear, that easy to understand, and it should solve an actual problem. So here's how you know if you have a UVP vibe check. All of these things, again, you want as many of these as possible. It's unique. Not a lot of companies can say that they've done it. Remember when I asked you those questions and everybody was raising their hand? You don't want that same thing out of your competition, that everybody else who's building something in that space can also raise their hand with the same description that you have. It's valuable, meaning that the customers who are using it are very excited about it. I have founders that come to me, they're like, I'm just really having a hard time with traction. I just have a really hard time getting customers. What you want are people being like, when is this going to be done? When is it finished? Please put this into my hand. I need to use this right now. If you are not getting that sort of reaction from customers, the thing that you're building is not urgent. It is not pervasive. It is not solving a real problem or desire. And I know that's sometimes very hard to hear because you're like, but the idea is so cool, Misty. Yes, it is, but it's not passing the vibe check. Number three, it's different, meaning there is a significant difference between what it is that you're building and doing and the competition or even the status quo. Not just for difference sake. Please see the bullet point above. It also has to be valuable. It's concise, very easy to understand, jargon-free. Please do not use a whole bunch of flowery language to where people are like, I'm so sorry, but what is it that you do again? You want it to be very clear the problem that you're solving. You want to surprise and delight. There's something that is unexpected about what it is that you're building that people are like, oh, whoa. I didn't even know that you could do that. It is not the faster horse. It is the new car version of whatever it is that you're building or solving. And also it's easy for other people to refer. If you can do and pass this vibe check with what it is you're building, and this is very difficult, y'all. I know I put it into a nice little easy checklist. Building a startup is actually very hard. Very few people can do it. Lots of people have good ideas. Lots of people have good businesses. Very few people can actually build a venture backable startup, which is why so many of them fail. But if you can do this, competition takes care of itself. It's very little about who else is building these same products and features, and more so about, am I building something that is uniquely valuable, people are clamoring for, that makes me a market leader, very relevant in this space? And that's all I got.
Thank you so much, Misty. We are going to move right into our next speaker. So, I mean, you need to step out. The bathrooms are on those sides of the building. So next up is, It's just gonna be a fun. Steven's coming up. How do we get rid of All right, so next up we have Noel Gillespie. We're really excited. He's from Procopio, their new sponsor for the Brink this year. He's here with Kevin Wilson up front, also from the firm IP attorney, who does have office hours with the Brink last Wednesday of the month. And so let's welcome Noel Gillespie. And
thank you. This is the IP portion, so it will not be anywhere as interesting as the prior portion of this. And I love what Misty had to say. How many of you have customers? A few. How many of them are clamoring for what you want? They can't wait for it. How many of you have IP around that? Good. I'm glad to see it. So most of the people I deal with, startups early stage, they don't have customers, right? They have a story. They know why it's great. They know what they're selling, right? To someone. Well, let me ask this question. How many of you want someone else's money to fund your company? Everyone's hand should go up, right? The IP slide in your pitch deck is usually one page, right? Here's what we filed. Here's what we have coming. It's not super exciting. But if I'm going to give you my money, I want to know I'm getting exclusivity in whatever it is I'm buying, right? I want to know that whatever you're selling me, no one else can sell, right? That's what makes it sticky, right? That's what gives you that unfair advantage, is the ability to say, not that we're not going to have competition, we will. Somebody will come into the space and try to do what we're doing. But there'll be certain features, functionalities that they just can't offer because we have IP around those things. Some of its brands, and I'm going to go through this, Kleenex. Kleenex had to spend billions of dollars to recover the word Kleenex. Because what do you call a tissue? You call it a Kleenex, right? It stopped being a trademark. What do you call, well, a lot of you are younger than me, but what do you call a copy? We used to call it a Xerox. Well, no, that was a company's trademark name. They had to spend billions of dollars to get their trademark back and say that is a Xerox copy, not a copy, right? But those names, those brands, that's stickiness, right? You want people to say Xerox, you want them to use it the right way so it doesn't get diluted. So IP plays an important role. And so most of my companies, they're looking for other people's money. They've got, this is what's so great, A, B, and C, right? And then they say, oh, but yeah, we filed a provisional patent on that. Well, if I'm looking at that presentation, I'm like, so what's in the provisional? Does it protect A, B, and C? That's what I want to see, right? I want to see that A, B, and C are protected, and then if I invest in you, I'm going to own A, B, and C as an investor. No one else can do it. Again, there'll always be competition. And actually, most of you, I'm guessing, because this is my experience, that you're not a follow-on. You're not doing what everybody else is doing. You're a new niche. You're creating that niche. And what happens is when your product gets out there, even though you're first to market, if you haven't protected what's key, second to market will win. Okay? Does anybody remember MySpace at this point? Right? Yeah, barely. But even Facebook isn't popular anymore, right? We're on to TikTok and whatever. We've moved past it, right? First to market loses often. The fact of the matter is MySpace wasn't first. I'm going to forget it. I worked with the guy. There was a company before that that dominated that space, right? A social network on college campus, ready to go public for tens of millions of dollars. I worked with the guy. I don't even remember the name anymore. The market crash came in 2000. IPO was put off, never made it. Big empty space that MySpace filled, and then Facebook took over, right? Now, I'm not sure how much IP you could get around a social network, but first to market rarely wins. And again, I'm going to forget the name. Who uses Google? Right. There was I'm going to forget the Tech magazine, big article about search engine out of Kansas, venture funded, greatest thing ever. I don't even remember the name because they're gone. They were first to market, but they weren't second to market, right? So the IP is what often makes you sticky, whether it's your brands, whether it's patenting that key innovation, right? So that you can say to them, hey, not that we won't have competition, right? So you create this niche. What happens is when you get to the market, someone looks at it and says, I can do that. I can do it for half as much. And they go to your customers and say half as much. And they can, especially if it's software these days, right? Once someone sees what you've done with the advantage of hindsight, they can stand on, you went down all the wrong rabbit holes. You made all the mistakes. You spent all the money. Now it's out there. Someone looks and goes, I can do that. And they can. The only thing that stops them typically is your IP, your patents in particular. So to be able to convey, hey, here's how I'm going to be sticky. Here's what we own. Here's how I'm going to give you exclusivity. You first have to kind of understand what your IP is, right? So that's what I'm going to go through. And by the way, as Misty said, interrupt me and ask me questions. I'd rather answer your questions than just talk at you about stuff maybe you already know. So you can even tell me skip ahead if you want. But
Okay, I have a question. With respect to patents, how many is enough for a start? Is one good enough? Is it 10?
I'm a patent attorney, so you never have enough. You just got to keep. So what we typically try to do is create a portfolio. So one is typically not enough because if you go sue Google on one patent, Google's going to go for $5 million. I can definitely invalidate that thing or make a jury think it's invalid. And now I got a free license for $5 million. You want to have a thicket, a web, we say, of patents. So how much is enough? The truth is we'll start out with 2 or 3 typically, usually one description, 2 or 3 patents, but over time, over 5, 6, 7, 8 years, we'll end up making that 12 or 20. But it's, we try to do it in a cost-effective manner where you're not spending $10,000 or $20,000 per patent, right? That's me. I'm an electrical engineer by training. I designed those first set of CDMA handsets that you all use now. I remember the first smartphone being walked around in Qualcomm. It was about that big. And now you guys I got mine in my front pocket right now. So anyway, I do a lot of med tech work, but I'm more on the digital health side. So you'll see in here, to me, whether it's med tech or something else, there's sensors, there's an app, there's data going to the cloud. We work algorithms on it. We send it back down, something actionable. So whether it's clean tech, med tech, tech, that's kind of the model. These are, so again, we want to understand what we have, right? Our trademarks, Kleenex, right? Our patents, trade secrets, copyrights. So I'm going to go through those a little bit, and I'll try to go quickly. I don't want to bore anybody. But then how do we put it all together kind of at the end? And then what do you want to put in your slide deck to convey, hey, we know what we're talking about. And if you invest in us, you're going to have exclusivity in what we're offering. So a trade secret, it's all of these things. It has to derive independent economic value by not being known. And it has to be subject to reasonable, under the circumstances, efforts under the circumstances to maintain its secrecy. So that's why NDAs are so important, right? Before you disclose, we'd like you to have it under an NDA. We'd also like to have our patents filed first. So those reasonable efforts right there. So if you've got code, not everybody in the company should have access to the source code. I mean, beyond NDAs, if you're disclosing what you're doing, you want an NDA. I'll talk about it a little bit in here. If you get a developer to develop your code, you want to have provisions in there that say, hey, you got to keep that confidential. And oh, by the way, we own any IP that comes out of it. So all of your contracts, all of your employment agreements, if you're disclosing, we want to have a confidentiality provision in there. And then we also want to limit who has access to it, right? The receptionist doesn't need access to the source code, right? We want to have a policy around that stuff. Historically, so I run into this sometimes. People will tell me, well, we're just going to keep it trade secret. We're not going to get patents. Well, that's great until your engineer or your scientist who knows exactly what you're doing walks out of your company, goes across the street and starts a company to compete with you. Not trade secret now, right? Unless they take something with them, right? If they take the formula with them, that's trade secret theft. If they walk out with what's in their head, especially in California, nothing you can do, right? So trade secrets aren't the greatest way to protect. Now, when we have algorithms and stuff like that or intense software, we don't put your code, your algorithm in the patents, okay? That is your trade secret, that know-how, your perfected, optimized algorithm source code. That's not in the patents. We're at a higher level. And you do try to, we try to keep that secret, but we're not protected from the guy who knows exactly how it works and goes across the street. So there are more, unfortunately, patents have been diluted in the US in terms of their value. There's been an attack on them. Oh, they're anti-competitive. And so it's getting harder to enforce them and harder to get the big damages rewards. A few years ago, they started a federal trade secret law that so you can go to federal court, which tends to be better than state court, which you have to do state by state anyway. And actually, there's been a lot of trade secret cases brought under that federal statute with big damages. So it is a little more valuable, I guess, now than it has been historically. Which brings up the non-compete. So you don't want that employee going across the street and competing with you. Yes, sir.
And they could just get rid of non-competes.
So in California, no non-competes, unless it's an executive. They tried to copy that at the federal level, but that was not, actually wasn't passed.
Oh, that was struck down.
Yeah, it was, I forget which agency was pushing it forward, but it didn't go forward. So, yeah. Trademarks, which we've talked about, so.
You still need NDAs on the previous slide. If you had already filed your patent,
Yes.
you still prevent getting an NDA.
Well, so first of all, your patent's going to stay non-published for 18 months. So anything in it's a trade secret for 18 months. So that's what we're talking about. So yes, once it publishes, anything in your patent is public, right? But early on, where you guys, I'm assuming, are, we want the NDA, but we would like to have your patents filed before you talk to anybody as well. But your patent's not going to issue for years. So if they take your idea and they steal it, I've got the NDA, I've got a contract claim I can go after them with right now. Right? We can also accelerate if that happens, if someone, even if they didn't steal it from you, if someone starts infringing, we can accelerate the patent based on their infringement. There's other mechanisms and get it issued. But if they took it from you, our NDA gives us a way to go after them when the patents won't issue for years typically, right? Word, name, symbol, or device. Usually with our startup companies, we've got the company name, right? We want to get what's called a word mark. That's literally just the word Qualcomm, just the word. Then there's the logo, right? The stylized mark. Typically want to get that. Maybe you've got a suite of products. Each product might have a name, right, that you want to trademark. So these are the things that we go after. But there are one, and this comes up all the time with our startups. Let's do a search. It costs a little bit of money, but let's find out if there's anything out there that might prevent you from registering your trademark before we start. And usually there is. Almost never does a search come back and say, 100% clear, go. It's like, well, you know, there's this and there's that, but we feel pretty good that you could probably get it for your goods and that stuff. But doing a search is important. Most of you, or many of you, probably some of you have customers, so that wasn't true, entirely true, but you're not in the market yet, right? So you can file your trademarks on what's called an intent to use basis. We want to do that when you're closer to hitting the market, typically. And so it's the same process, you just haven't used it yet. And at the end, when it registers, they say, okay, show me you're using it now. And then they'll register it on the trademark register. And the reason you want to do that is you actually can't register it until you're using it in interstate commerce. So you do have to have sales, multiple states. But then it becomes constructive notice to everybody in the United States anywhere that you have that mark. And so you get priority over everybody else. Trade dress is I'm going to tell you how that comes into it. So trade dress is like a look and feel of something. I like to use the Coca-Cola bottle, right? If I see a Coca-Cola bottle, how many people know what a Coca-Cola bottle looks like? I'm old, so maybe not everybody. I know it's a Coca-Cola bottle because of the shape. That's a trade dress. Like I can just see it from here. I know what it is. So if you have a device in your product, right, it doesn't have to be shaped this way. I don't actually know. This is a Kensington. I wouldn't know that by looking at it. So they don't have trade dress rights in this. But if I did, if I was like, oh, that's a Kensington thing, then there's trade dress in the thing. So we try to protect that. And I'll talk about how all that stuff comes together. Copyrights. This is anything, original works of authorship fixed in a tangible medium. As soon as you do that, so as soon as I made these slides, I had a copyright in this. Actually, Procopio owns it. I like to leave this in there because it says copyright 2018. I made these in 2024, so it's not updated, but you want to update your copyright notice. But just by putting this here, you've established your copyrights in whatever it is, right? And again, this can be, and I think I have it on here. This can be, if you have an app, your user interface, the look and feel of your user interface can be both trade dress and copyrightable, right? Because you fix that in a tangible medium. I talked about shapes, websites. So your web pages, you want to copyright. If you're making software, you definitely want to put your copyright notice into your software. So if someone copies your software, you have a cause of action against them. If they see how your software operates and then make something similar that does the same thing, they haven't copied your software. So your copyright does not protect you there. Your patents would, hopefully. And that's that one, their software. So those are just some examples. I come from a family of photographers. So when I think of copyrights growing up, I always thought of art, right? Photography, drawing, stuff like that, but it's software, it's your user interface, that stuff is copyrightable.
I have a general question about patents. So I do a lot of engineering. That's what I'm going to school for. And a lot of the stuff that I've seen patented are like, it performs a function and then they have like how it performs this function and they patent it. But to me, I could have came to that same conclusion without even looking at what they did.
Yeah.
Does that still fall under a patent?
If
Even
you have a
it's
good
like-
patent attorney, it does. Yeah, so there's, we say there's no innocent infringement. So even though you didn't copy me again, right? You didn't steal my trade secrets. You didn't copy my code or whatever. If what you do infringes my patent claim, you still infringe and I get to stop you or make you pay me a license for it. So what we're trying to do is patent these things at a level, especially if it's software, where kind of no matter how you get there in the code, remember I said we don't put the code in the patent. If it does the same function, so think an architectural level, right? If A, then B, C combined with D, weight, threshold, whatever, out at that level, right? If you're taking the same inputs, kind of doing the same stuff and getting the same output, if I did my job right, you infringe, even though you didn't copy me, even though you did it a little different way. And that's what that pitches to those investors, right? We're gonna own it. Not that anybody can't compete, but these features, these functionalities, the things we're selling to you, the things that you want to invest in us for, no one can have those, right? So when that, I call them the ankle biters, when the ankle biters see what we're doing and they try to copy us and they go to our customers and they say, hey, I can do that for half as much. We get to go to the customer and say, no, they can't. If you want these functions and you do, it's why you chose us. You don't want to go with them because they can't do it. They can't offer it. I have the patents on that.
Is it better to file a continuation patent on a new feature of a pre-existing product you filed a utility patent on, or is it better to just file another utility patent on that specific feature?
So good question. For those of you who don't know, so once I filed an application at the patent office, right, I have a description, I have figures, I have descriptions of the figures, and then I have claims at the end that say my thing does ABC. I can file what's called a continuation, which was this question, which is a new application. And I can say, well, now what I want to claim is, you know, kind of same thing, but doing XYZ, because it also does XYZ, and I think that's novel, right? So if I disclosed ABC and XYZ in my original disclosure that I filed, I can file that continuation years later, as long as my original application is still pending, hasn't gone abandoned or issued. I can file it as a continuation, and it'll be as though I filed it on the day of my original filing, which can be important because what the patent office does is try to see, we call it prior art, is has anybody done what you're trying to claim, ABC, XYZ, before you, right? Is that in the prior art already? Well, if I file my continuation 3 years later, but I get the benefit of that filing date, I just push that prior art date back 3 years, right? So that's why the continuation can be important. So if XYZ was disclosed in your original one, you actually have to file it as a continuation. If what you're doing though is like, hey, I've got something new, additional, and it's patentably distinct, you want to file a new application. And the reason is your patent term is 20 years from your priority date. So why lose the 3 years if it's patentably distinct? So that's our breakdown on that. Which must be new and non-obvious over the prior art, which we just discussed. You can't enforce it till it's issued. We discussed that. There's ways to accelerate it if you need to. I'm going to come to you 1 second. But it excludes others from making, using, or selling. And again, the way we work this is there's going to be competitors. There's going to be ankle biters that are trying to copy what you're doing if it's really compelling, right? But certain features, functionality, they cannot offer to your customers. And that's how you get premium pricing, right? To me, that's how you've gone in with a premium, because you created a niche, no one's offering it, you can charge whatever you want. If people want it, to Misty's point, right? But when the ankle biters come, they're gonna tell your customers 50%, I can do it for 50% less, but you need to preserve that premium pricing you've established. You need to be able to say, no, they can't offer what's in our patent. So, yeah.
So our product is a software. We've been going back and forth about whether to pursue a patent because
Yes.
if it's too broad, you can't enforce it. If it's too narrow, people can work around you. And with very limited resources, that's a hard decision. But then one other comment was that, well, you could still use it for leverage that could scare away potential competitors. Could you speak on like the value of the patent for leverage versus?
Well, that's all it is leverage. So my introductory, so typically what we try to do for software, not for like a therapeutic, but for software is we try to put together a suite of provisional applications for around $4,000. You got to pay that. It's probably a $10,000 investment on our part. But from the moment I do that, I'm thinking, how am I going to sue someone on this to keep them out of my market and from eroding my premium pricing, right? If we're not thinking that from the beginning, and if we're not willing to do it when the time comes, yeah, don't do patents because they're just expensive ornaments on your wall, right? The key is to try to, I get it, you don't have money, money's tight, you got other priorities. We try to ease into it where you don't have a lot of out-of-pocket costs up front. And then once you've raised someone else's money, they pay to blow these things out. The good news is in the US, you can actually build these things out like I described, where you're building a web, a few initially, and then we grow them into 12 relatively inexpensively. You can't do that overseas. I mean, we have 10% in one or two countries, Europe and China usually, 10% of what we have in the US because it's just way too expensive overseas.
I was wondering if you're gonna speak today about licensing a patent or performance clauses and how to like work that contract out with a licensor.
In license or out license?
Like licensing my company's patent to a larger company. And then like one question I have too is like, do I ask my patent attorney to make that contract, or does a business like lawyer make that contract? And also like how to work out what I call like performance clauses of like thing, especially like for me, one of the things I imagine having doing in this contract would be like a minimum amount of money and effort, like focused toward marketing the product on social media and YouTube.
Yeah, there's no template, to be honest with you, in that scenario. I will say it's hard to get a big company to license your IP unless they are convinced you're willing to sue them, which usually requires you suing someone. If you've licensed other people and there's already some precedent, they might do it. But yeah, certainly performance matrix, a lot of times what you see is a minimum royalty yearly, right? So you're going to pay me 3% per widget, but a minimum of $200,000 a year, right? So they've got some, and often as sales go up, royalty goes down often, right? I mean, so yes, there's a lot of that stuff, but it's not templated, I want to say.
Do you do that stuff? Do you make those contracts as a patent attorney, or have you had a client that you did a patent for, license their patent to a company? And when they did that, did you do the contract, or did you send them to like a business lawyer who's more?
Usually a combination, yeah.
Combination?
Yeah.
Like
We actually, I mean, we have people that specialize in that, right? Licensing. And they get input on me. What's the IP? What's from me, but it's.
And usually would you say like the patent attorney would most commonly like work in collaboration with like a business lawyer, a lawyer?
Typically, yeah. Typically.
They're like writing contracts?
Yeah.
Okay.
Typically.
Just wanted to see, we filed a patent, how long ago?
Oh, that would have been July of last year.
How long on average does it take? We have a patent lawyer, all that stuff. Is there a way to expedite?
Yes, costs money.
How
A few $1,000s. So typically you file the application, it's gonna sit at the patent office for 18 to 24 months
So we've heard-
before anybody looks at it. Then they'll give you what we call an office action telling you, you have nothing patentable here, sorry. That just starts off a back and forth between your patent attorney and the patent office saying, no, you don't understand. Oh, we're gonna admit, like, there's a back and forth, usually takes about a year. And so maybe 3.5 years later, you have a patent. You could, that 18 to 24 months, you can shorten to 4-ish by paying $3,000,
$3,000.
maybe even 2,500. Yeah, it's called track one. You pay a $2,500 fee, say I want to be in track one, and then it puts them on a schedule. They have to get back to you in about 4 months. So.
Is it worth doing that if you're still protected while filed? Like, what's the benefit to that really if we're still protected? Right now?
So, yeah, so yes and no. I usually look forward, right? So if you tell me you're gonna go out and raise 10 million starting in 6 months or so, I'm probably gonna say, you know what we should do is accelerate one of your patent applications. So hopefully we have a notice of allowance because it's gonna increase your value, it will. When you get into due diligence, your investors, potential investors will say, do you have IP? And I can't tell you the number of deals where we're on this deal, we're on this deal, we're on this deal, and with 2 weeks left on a 6-week timeline to get the $100 million deal closed, all of a sudden the other side goes, show me your IP. And we're caught flat-footed, but they don't just say, show me your IP, they send you a big checklist, answer all these questions. Well, half of them are inapplicable. So you're like, and then they're like, oh, well, you don't have an answer to this question. Right? So that, not that they're gonna not give you 20 million, but 20 million for 30%, all of a sudden becomes 20 million for 40%, right? They always will use your IP to try to drive that value down. Every deal I think I've been in.
I was gonna add for first-time filers, and I think maybe for micro entities in the US, there is an expedited program you can apply for free, that I've found that I am eligible for. I just thought I'd bring that up. If you guys are first-time filing, I think there's a free.
So yeah, you have to make sure you're a micro entity, but yeah.
Thank you.
All right, what else we got? So this is the timeline we just went through. So how do you develop a success? You got to know what you have, right? What is my IP? And then you want to be able to convey it. You know, we're going to have trade dress, we're going to have, you know, trade secrets, we're going to have patents, we're going to have all that stuff. And then understand how is it, beyond raising money and putting it in your pitch deck, how is it really going to further your business objectives, right? How is it going to drive that premium pricing? Because if it's not, don't waste money on it, right? Like I said, if you're not going to enforce it, if you're like, well, we'll never enforce this, don't do it. It's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you're like, hey, at the end, if someone asks, well, is there a deterrent effect? Yeah, but not to Google, not to Apple, right? Not to big players. I mean, ask Sonos if, you know, having patents, if they weren't willing to enforce it, what's the value of them? But we do want to do it in a cost-effective manner. Hang on, what's the next slide? And so this gets to your slide deck, but yeah.
On the previous slide,
Yeah.
on the list of the sub-bullets, if you had a reference design that you could just hand it to a potential licensee, does that increase the value of the startup or it doesn't matter?
Well, it depends. Well, so that would be your business model, right? Your business model is, hey, we're going to create a reference design that we're then going to license to people. I mean, that's ARM, right? I mean, ARM has a reference design that they license to everybody that makes a chip.
I meant in the sense of there is the patent.
Yeah.
How somebody else gets to implement that, it's rather complex. Like the surf Qualcomm used to give up. That's like, you know, you take that and you can build a phone. That's what I'm trying to.
Yeah, well, so ideally your patents would cover your reference design, right? So that they can't just, I mean, you would have a contract saying, don't reverse engineer my reference design, and if they did, you'd have a contract claim, but you want to have the patent claim that says, even if my contract claim fails, if you copied my reference design, you infringe my patents, right? So you want to have both. So this is getting more to the slide. So depending on where you are, you're trying to convey that, hey, we've created value through the IP to those investors. It's going to be different, right? If you're bootstrapping, if you're at friends and family, they probably don't care if you have patents filed, right? They're going to give you your 50 grand. If you're getting money, if you're at a seed, you know, now seed is typically what I would call kind of institutional investors, angels for sure. You at least want to have the provisionals filed, like I said, where it's like, provisionals is just a placeholder. It gives you 1 year to actually file the actual utility patent applications. But you want to at least have that done and be able to tell them a story about what you're going to protect beyond just gets to the IP slide in the pitch deck and it says, oh, we filed a provisional. Like you want that, I'll go over it a little bit here, but you want that slide to tell them a little bit more. You want it to say, hey, we know what we're doing. We know what our IP is and we plan this out. Series A, certainly Series B and C. But Series A, you probably want to maybe accelerate so you can say, yeah, I've actually got an issue. Not only do I have all these utility applications filed, but I have one issued. Like I feel confident we're going to get all this and we're going to own ABC and or XYZ. Right? So if you invest in us, you're getting exclusivity in that, right? And that's what's going to make us sticky. That's why our clients are coming to us. They want those features and functionalities. We're the only one that can provide it because of our patents. Series B, C, exit, that kind of stuff. I mean, we want to have issued patents. We probably want to have freedom to operate. So there's a bunch of other stuff that you probably want to have to show that, yeah, this IP means something. This is just, like I said, what I do a lot is there's some kind of sensor or device, there's an app on the phone, there's a cloud, there's a bunch of, it's all AI now, but you know, algorithms in the back end and we're sending data back down. This is just how all of these things would fit together, all those different kinds of IP, right? So on the device, you've got design patents, which I didn't talk about a lot, but trade dress, that covers the look and feel. You've got the function, that's the utility patent, that's the typical one on the software, hardware. Maybe on the design of the device, you've got maybe trademarks, Kensington. I don't know, that doesn't say anything to me, so I'm not sure that's functioning as a trademark, but hopefully yours will. The app on the phone, you've got look and feel, so there's design patents, trade secrets, as well as the function, any algorithms on the phone. How you output data can be your IP. Right? If you've got a really killer dashboard that makes it easy to see and visualize data, that can be protectable in a variety of ways. Copyrights on the software, trademarks again, cloud. So that's how we put it all together at all those different levels. And that's how we create a suite of patents around those things. So we don't want a patent typically. Let's see. I don't want to run out of time, but so when do you start? You got to start in the beginning. You got to start early. That's why I asked how many have clients. Like it's great to be able to say, I have clients, I have stickiness. I think that's how Twitter got its investment, right? From Thiel, who was the one, Thiel. They didn't have a lot of users, but the users they had used it a lot. And so Peter Thiel said, I'm investing, right? There's that kind of stickiness. But if you don't have customers and you're trying to get somebody else's money, you got to be telling them a story about how it's going to be sticky, why it's going to be sticky. We do X, Y, Z, and no one else can because we have IP around it. To protect that, you got to start. So you want to start early though, because like I just said, it can take 3 years on the patent side at least, right? So start early thinking about it. And then, but in the interim, you've got all these agreements here. You have the chance to potentially give away your IP if you don't do those agreements right? If you have a developer doing software development for you, does that agreement make sure that you own any IP that comes out of that? Right? We see this less and less now, so maybe people are becoming educated, but saw this all the time where the agreement didn't say. And so the developer doesn't produce, he doesn't develop. And you say, well, you know, give me, I paid you 50 grand, give me the source code that I paid for. And they say, I own the source code. Right? Like you're stuck, right? You got to go back. So all of these agreements, you want to make sure they're done right so that you're not blowing your IP ownership before you even get to a chance to file something on it, right? It can happen. I won't go through all of these, but these are some of the issues on the founders agreement. This is that contractor agreement. The made for hire, just so you know, that's for copyright. So I can have an agreement that says I own any IP that comes out of this. But if they're creating software for you, for example, the copyright, you actually have to have the language that says this is a work made for hire and we own any copyrights, and they have to sign it. If those two things aren't there, you haven't, they own the copyright, you don't. So that's and then just in general, any of these agreements, you always want to be clear, what are you doing? Get milestones and don't pay until they hit the milestone. So if you say, hey, develop this for $100,000, don't give them $100,000, right? Say, hit this milestone, I'll give you 25, hit this milestone, I'll give you another 25. Make sure they're producing so you don't end up in that situation where you're just stuck and you paid them whatever. Employee agreements. The biggest thing with employees is you want to make sure that they acknowledge that they won't use trade secrets or IP of their former employee, right? They need to say, I won't do that. I understand I can't. You don't want that in there. And then there's always this 2872. They can list any typically inventions, patents that they have before that, right, won't be yours. They can say, yeah, this stuff I'm bringing, I already have it, right? It's mine.
Can you go back to the previous slide?
Yeah.
What does may have shop rights mean?
So if you don't get them, so their employment agreement needs to say any of the IP I create for you, you own, right? Unless it's on my 2872 list. That's mine already. If you don't have that and they developed it while working for you, you don't necessarily own it. Shop rights is because they developed it while you were paying them, you can use it, right? But you can't stop someone else from using it. You can't stop them from licensing it to someone else.
Even if it's for hire.
Well, you got to have, yes, you want all this stuff in your
Okay,
agreement.
then it's-
That's if you don't do that, you might have shop rights. You might still be able to get your product out the door without paying them, but you may not own it. This is research and tech transfer. So if you're pulling anything out of like a university, there's certain things that we look at. Non-disclosure agreements we talked about. So often if you're pitching, Misty over here, she's not going to sign an NDA for you, right? But so you want to be careful about what you put in that pitch. But if she's interested in investing afterward, you might say, well, okay, now I need you to sign an NDA and I'll go deeper with you, right? And you can be kind of progressive with them.
If I employ an engineer to design a component for my product and I have them sign an NDA before we begin work, and they develop, and like I bring them the idea for the product, let's say, and then they develop a CAD file for it in SolidWorks, that's ready to go to manufacturing. That person can't take that CAD file and license it to someone else, right? If I have the NDA signed, right?
Not necessarily. You want an agreement that says you own all the IP that comes out of that development. Just because they can't disclose your confidential information, that doesn't mean the stuff they developed is your confidential information, right? You need an agreement that says, I own that, and that's my confidential information. So you need the NDA and you need the provision that says anything you develop for me, I own.
And that's
What's that contract called? And like, do I need to have my patent attorney do it, or is that something I can do on my own and just make it?
It's actually usually the employment attorney, but
Pardon?
it's usually the employment attorney. But again, talking to me about the IP provisions and making sure they fit. So Yeah, it takes a village, I guess, is what I'm saying. You need corporate attorneys, you need employment attorneys, you need patent attorneys.
Employment attorney does that?
Yeah, typically,
May I please have the name of that type of contract again?
an employment. Well, if it's a contractor, it's a contractor agreement.
What's the main idea? You said it was like real, there's a one-liner of like any.
There needs to be a provision in there relating to IP and making sure that you own anything that comes out of it
That I own anything that they develop
for you. Yeah.
during their time of employment for me, basically.
If they're employee, it's an employment agreement. If they're a contractor, it's a contractor agreement. Same provision though. Anything you develop is mine.
Employee and contract.
One's an employee, you withhold tax and all that stuff. You're paying them, they're on your, and a contractor is just that. Hey, I'm going to contract with you to do these things. Yeah.
Is it possible to obtain a patent or copyright for a production process?
Yes.
That's,
If it's novel, right? If it's a process for producing something,
so everybody will obtain the same product, but we just have a different.
yeah.
model.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with something like that is how would you know if someone's infringing, right? Because they're doing it in their factory and you don't have access. But yeah, I mean, in general, if it's a novel way to make a thing, that's patentable. Yeah, I went, I mean, this is if we're not protecting what you're selling to your investors, your partners, your customers, well, we're kind of wasting our time, right? So whatever you're selling to those people, and it might be a little different, your investors, your partners, your customers, but we want to make sure we're protecting it. If we're not, if it's just a cool way to do something, but to your point, people would get the same thing differently. You got to really think about, well, is this valuable to do, right? And that's all I have. Thank God, I was getting bored of me. One more question back there.
So you talked about enforcing a patent. So what would you say to budget annually for, how do you make this annual?
I want you to budget at least $5 million for that enforcement. So that really is the chasm on the IP side, which is you spent hundreds of thousands, really over maybe 5 to 10 years, you spent hundreds of thousands to get this IP. And now Google's in for it, even if it's not Google. You go to any patent attorney and say, well, what's a patent litigation going to cost? They're going to say at least $5 million through trial. So the question is, where do we come up with that money? There's a lot of ways to do it. If it really is Google, there's people out there that will finance your litigation for you. You might be able to get it just on pure contingency and avoid the financer. So no one in the middle, they'll just do it for free and take a piece. But it's hard, right? Like if Google's not really in the market and they haven't made any money, so there's no damages, I'm not going to fund you $5 million for nothing. So it is a difficult area. But there are different kind of investors that will invest in IP litigation. They want to see, you have to make a credible case that there's $100 million in damages because they're going to discount it down to 50, and they want to make sure everybody gets some money out of it. You, the funder, the law firm it needs to kind of, but that is a difficulty. It is for sure to get to that space. Hopefully we built a thicket of patents that infringer. If they're smaller too, well, then we're more on even footing, and they don't have money, you don't have money, we can figure out a strategy. If they're big, we want to make it more worth their while to buy you for 40 million, 50 million than to spend 20 million on a litigation, right? So there's strategies, but it is an issue. I'm actually trying, I think I'm close to getting one of these funded right now, so.
Actually finding whoever, let's say it's something that multiple people could, how do you even figure out who could or could not be infringing on the patent?
Well, typically it's a competitor, right? It's someone in your space. It's that ankle biter or someone that's doing something that's competing with you, and you're saying, hey, that infringes my IP. You know, another avenue, by the way, to enforcement, maybe even you've gone out of business, but now everybody's doing what you patented. There's companies out there that'll buy those patents specifically to go and cut you in on the damages specifically to go enforce them at that point. So often that's the case, like it's years later, maybe you're even out of business, but all of a sudden everybody's infringing your patents, right? So, yeah.
From the Fowler Business Conference.
Oh.
Back there.
Hi, just a quick.
Winner.
I would say a little bit sidebar. What's your thoughts on these companies that are essentially these patent aggregator companies that are buying up all the surrounding IP from existing like commercial products that are there and then forcing them into a stronghold for litigation potentially? Is there investment opportunity from an outsider or are those like multi-level marketing schemes? What's the?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. Yeah, so they're not like public where you can buy shares in them typically. They do raise money, though. I actually just heard of one. So some of the guys that were at Qualcomm apparently are buying up. You know, they found, I won't say the technology, but they found a bunch of patents in a certain technology that they think, to my point, everybody's doing now. So they're gonna, you know, raise money, buy them, and going forth. So. But is there a market out there where it's like, hey, just anybody can be like, give me 5 shares in that endeavor? No, you kind of got to know who they are. Yeah, I don't know of anywhere. It's just kind of like you can invest in it. You got to know
You
some.
definitely be an individual investor or something inside of it, but those are legitimate entities that are buying up patents around.
Oh, yeah.
Viable business model essentially.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. And like I said, there's more and more investment in that space. So it's kind of coming back here in the US. There's a definite attack on, so the Apples, the Microsofts, those guys, they want to commoditize patent infringement, right? Because if you make this phone, 1,000 patents are going to read on it. And what they want to be able to say is every one of those patents I read on, that's $50,000. So now I just put it in my bill of material. I set my price, I'm done. Versus, hey, one of those might hit for 500 million, right? One of them might be 1 million. One of them might, you know, they want they want to cram it down, and they've been successful since the Obama administration in being able to do that, to really commoditize patent infringement. But it's starting to come back. And so the investment in infringements, litigation was less. It's starting to come back. There's been several billion-dollar judgments recently. So it's starting to come back and there's more money in that space now. So it's a little more viable.
One last one. Last one.
What is the statute of limitations for infringement, and does it ever make sense to wait a little bit until you get closer to the end of that, so that damages can increase to the point that it makes sense to litigate?
So your patent is good for 20 years from the date of filing. There can be some adjustments on the end, but in general, 20 years. To mitigate against what you just said, you can only go back 6 years for damages. So potentially, yes, if the damages are greater 6 years from now than they are right now, I might want to wait. But there are things called latches or waivers. So if the court figures out or decides that you knew, should have known, should have brought it earlier, they can say, you know, you waited too long. So if there's infringement and you're waiting, not a year or two, that's okay. You are running the risk that you may not be able to enforce it all. So.
Let's give it a big round of applause. Procopio. And I will just say, please, next week is going to be Zoom. We're going to talk about business models. And then the week after that, we'll be back here. And Benton Moore is going to lead us through traction, because traction came up a lot tonight. We're going to help you figure out how to put that in your slide deck. So thanks for coming and have a great rest of your evening.